It was past midnight and raining. The street guards, females, whose task it was to prevent male crime, had abandoned their posts and were huddled in doorways. Their rifles were protectively tucked under their coats, and their heads pulled down inside their great collars for defense against the wind. To the east, Central Park lay like nature's graveyard, a result of the ecology program's abandonment in the early 70s. Not a leaf remaining to catch the raindrops, or a blade of grass to prevent the downpour from collecting in the streams and lakes. And to the south, the tall office buildings of Manhattan loomed like black giants against the dark sky. Keith Montgomery, coatless and drenched, moved hastily up Broadway, clinging to the buildings to conceal himself in the shadows. He was in his early 20s, with a strong featured face and a solid, powerful body. His dark hair was flattened against a high forehead, and his eyes were glazed by fear and determination. Each doorway he was forced to pass posed a threat. A man on the streets at night, without an authorized pass, was subject to arrest and imprisonment. Leaning against the rough bricks of a building, he wiped the rain from his face and stared at the dark street ahead of him. He had succeeded in avoiding 2 street guards, who were too involved with their own personal discomfort to have noticed him. Unfortunately, there were 4 long blocks ahead of him. 4 long blocks to temporary safety of his friend's apartment. Keith, however, could not be assured that his friend would welcome a man on the run, as he would be jeopardizing his own safety and face arrest for aiding and abetting a criminal. Keith had no other choice, as he had nowhere else to go. Thunder rumbled in the west, and the first flash of lightning illuminated the deserted streets. Almost instantly, the shrill sound of a whistle broke to his right, and a street guard stepped from a doorway, struggling to free her rifle from her garments.
Male pig, stop!
Suddenly, the street became filled with deafening whistles. From the next block over, Keith saw another guard step into the rain from her protective doorway. She immediately started running forward, her rifle raised in a firing position. Keith's decision was instantaneous. Better, he thought, to be shot while attempting to escape than to die like a lamb being led to the slaughter. He sprang away from the building and ran. His destination was the side street, and his long legs gave him the advantage over his pursuers. There was an explosion, and something zinged past his ear. He ran in a zigzag pattern until he had passed the last of the street lights and had reached the edge of the park. Here, concealed by the trunk of a leafless tree, he stopped and pressed his hand to his chest to quiet the pounding of his heart, while peering back at his pursuers. 2 guards moved past the streetlights in the middle of the block. They were walking slowly, checking every possible place of concealment. Keith glanced at the gnarled shadows of the park trees. The poison of the atmosphere had completely destroyed the vegetation. There would be no hiding place in all of the park's great expanse.
In the park!
In panic, He glanced about for a place to hide himself, and his eyes fell on the dark hole. Without even considering what it was, he dashed forward and found himself descending concrete steps cluttered with debris. When he reached the bottom and discovered the rotten planks nailed over a doorway, he knew he had stumbled upon an abandoned subway entrance. The entire underground transit system had been closed up and designated as unsafe by the first female president. Turning, Keith saw the beams of light cut through the darkness above. The subway would likely be unknown to the guards, but he knew they would not miss the gaping black hole. In anger and frustration, he began tearing at the planks and felt one of them give. Then a second snapped free, and he scrambled through the narrow opening. Inside, he descended several steps, moving slowly with his hands extended. A musty odor stung his nostrils, and something small brushed against his foot as it scurried away to safety. He heard boot heels striking the top of the outer stairs.
An abandoned subway. Do you suppose he got inside?
Flashlight beams moved slowly over the boarded entrance and illuminated the interior floor. There were puddles of water on the steps where they had been worn down by years of use. A rat's eyes flashed in the beams of light before turning and vanishing into a crack in the concrete. Keith continued to crouch, waiting. He had seen a metal pipe on the floor near the stairs. If the guard started to descend, he would use it as a weapon. He had gone too far to give in to capture without a struggle.
I bet he took to the park.
There was more mumbling, as if the two were debating his route of escape. Then, the lights left the entrance, and the darkness settled about him. He did not move for several moments. His chest ached as he felt the warm flow of blood on his cold flesh. He looked on the ground at the trail of blood that started from the entrance to his dungeon. His eyes focused on the nail that must have scratched him on his way in, as a drop of his blood fell to the concrete floor. He knew the guards would return to the subway entrance when their efforts to locate him had failed. He had no choice but attempt to feel his way along the tracks until he had put some distance between himself and his pursuers. As he struggled to his feet, a flash of lightning illuminated the dark caverns of concrete and steel. He had a clear, if brief, view of the turnstiles and the steps beyond, and the abandoned train. When the darkness closed in again, he moved forward with more assurance as the first few feet of his journey was stamped into his memory. He had moved only a few steps when he heard the sounds emanating from beyond. His body tensed up, and he put his weight on the balls of his feet. He had waited to defend himself as he stared into the blackness.
I know you're there. You'll never take me alive.
There was no answer. He moved slowly towards the turnstile, thinking that, if he succeeded in reaching the tracks, he could risk running in the darkness. As he felt the cold metal of the turnstile pressed against him, the interior was once again illuminated by the lightning. In the flash of that instant, He had seen a young woman standing near the toll booth. She wore a blood-red dress and high black boots. Her hair was in complete disarray, straggling about her face, and her lips were parted in a smile. The sight of her was more terrifying than that of the street guards.
You're trapped. Welcome to the home of the subterranean.
He attempted to flee toward the tracks, but something solid crashed against his skull, and he fell to his knees, sinking into the abyss of unconsciousness, with her laughter filling his head.